Good morning, third graders. We are going to be reading today lesson 5 of The Wind in the Willows, and this chapter is called Mr. Badger. So let's talk a little bit about what we've already learned. First, what are themes? Themes are a literary tool that authors use when they're writing a story. It's a big idea that comes up many times over the course of a story. So some of the themes that we have talked about are friendship, loyalty, and responsibility and irresponsibility. Today, we are going to learn a new theme. This theme is called hospitality. And hospitality means treating guests well and being warm, welcoming, and friendly toward them. So, a hospitable person will be attentive to their guests' needs. They will make sure they are comfortable and have everything they need. So, if you have a guest over to your house, maybe a friend or maybe another family, you would make sure that they might have snacks to eat, that they have activities to do, that they have a place to sit. That is being hospitable, and that is showing hospitality. Some of the other terms we've learned are these: perspective. Perspective means the point of view or the character through whose eyes we experience the story. So far we have been reading and hearing a lot of Mole's perspective, although there was a brief time in yesterday's story that we heard a little bit of Rat's perspective. We also learned the word narration, which means the act of telling the story. So in today's read aloud, excuse me, I want you to listen carefully for examples of the theme of hospitality. That is what we're going to focus on in our short write today. So listen for examples of characters showing hospitality, being welcoming, being warm, taking care of guests, those sorts of things. All right, here we go. Rat and Mole waited patiently for what seemed a very long time. At last, there was the noise of a bolt sliding back, and then the door opened a few inches. "Who is it?" said a rather gruff voice. "Oh, Badger!" cried the Rat. "It's me, Rat, and my friend Mole, and we've lost our way in the snow." "What, Ratty, my dear little man!" exclaimed the Badger. "Come along in, both of you." The two animals tumbled over each other in their eagerness to get inside. The Badger, who wore a long dressing gown, carried a flat candlestick in his paw. "This is not the sort of night for small animals to be out," he said paternally. "But come into the kitchen. There's a fire there, and supper, too." That word paternally means in like a father-like way. He shuffled on in front of them, and they followed him down a long, gloomy passage into a central hall. Once there, they could dimly see other tunnel-like passages branching off in various directions, but there were doors in the hall as well. One of these the Badger flung open, and at once they found themselves in a large, fire-lit kitchen. The floor was well-worn red brick, and on the wide hearth burnt a fire of logs. A couple of high-backed settles were facing each other on either side of the fire. In the middle of the room there stood a long table with benches on either side. The kindly Badger guided them to one of the settles and bade them remove their wet coats and boots. Then he fetched them dressing gowns and slippers. He bathed the Mole's shin with warm water and dressed the cut. When they were thoroughly warm, the Badger summoned them to the table to eat a delicious meal. As they dined, the Badger sat in his armchair at the head of the table and listened as the animals told their story. When supper was finished, the Badger said heartily, "Now then, tell us the news from your part of the world. How's old Toad going on?" "Oh, from bad to worse," said the Rat gravely. "Another smash-up." "How many has he had?" inquired the Badger gloomily. "Smashes or machines?" asked the Rat. "Oh, well, after all, it's the same thing with Toad. This is the seventh." "He's been in the hospital 3 times," put in the Mole, "and as for the fines he's had to pay, it's simply awful to think of." "Yes, and that's part of the trouble," continued the Rat. "Toad's rich, we all know, but he's not a millionaire. He'll either be killed or ruined. Badger, we're his friends. Oughtn't we to do something?" The Badger thought for a while. "Now look here," he said at last. "Of course you know I can't do anything now." His two friends agreed, quite understanding his point. No animal, according to the rules of animal etiquette, is ever expected to do anything heroic during the off-season of winter. "Very well, then," continued the Badger, "but when once the year has really turned, if not before, you know." Both animals nodded gravely. They knew. "Well, then," went on the Badger, "then we'll bring Toad back to reason. Well, You're asleep, Rat." "Not me," said the Rat, waking up with a jerk. "He's been asleep 2 or 3 times since supper," said the Mole, laughing. He himself was feeling quite lively. Badger's house suited him and made him feel at home, whereas the Rat, who slept every night in a bedroom beside a river, naturally felt the atmosphere quite oppressive. "Well, it's time we were all in bed," said the Badger, getting up and fetching flat candlesticks. "Come along, you two, and I'll show you to your quarters. And take your time tomorrow morning. Breakfast at any hour you please." He conducted the two animals to a long room with two little white beds in it. Moments later, the two white beds contained one mole and one rat. Let's pause for a moment. Have you heard any examples of hospitality so far in the story? Perhaps Badger letting Rat and Mole come in, and then Badger taking care of Mole's cut. Badger offers them rooms to sleep in and tells them that they get to have breakfast in the morning. The two tired animals came down to breakfast very late the next morning. When they did emerge, they found a bright fire burning in the kitchen and two young hedgehogs sitting on a bench at the table eating oatmeal. "Where have you two youngsters come from?" said the Rat pleasantly. "Lost your way in the snow?" "Yes, sir," said the elder of the two hedgehogs. "Me and little Billy here, we was trying to find our way to school and we lost ourselves. At last we found Mr. Badger's back door." "I understand," said the Rat, cutting himself some rashers from a side of bacon, while the Mole dropped some eggs into a saucepan. "And what's the weather like outside?" "Oh, terrible bad, sir," said the Hedgehog. "Where's Mr. Badger?" inquired the Mole. "The master has gone into his study, sir," replied the Hedgehog, "and he said as how he was going to be particular busy this morning, and on no account was he to be disturbed." This explanation, of course, was thoroughly understood. The animals well knew that Badger, having eaten a hearty breakfast, had retired to his study. Once there, he had settled himself in an armchair and was being busy in the usual way at this time of year. Class, do you know what that means? He's being busy during winter. Remember that many animals during winter hibernate, so his busyness is sleeping. The front doorbell clanged loudly, and the Rat sent Billy, the smaller hedgehog, to see who it might be. Presently, Billy returned with the Otter. "Thought I should find you here," said the Otter. "They were all in a great state of alarm along Riverbank when you didn't return home last night, but I knew that when people were in any fix, they went to Badger." My, it was fine, coming through the snow as the red sun was rising. I was about halfway when I came across a rabbit sitting on a stump. He told me that Mole had been seen in the wild wood last night. "Weren't you at all, nervous?" asked the Mole. "Nervous?" The Otter showed a gleaming set of strong white teeth as he laughed. "Never! Here, Mole, fry me some slices of ham. I'm frightfully hungry." So the Mole, having cut some slices of ham, set the hedgehogs to fry it, and returned to his own breakfast, while the Otter and the Rat chatted about the river bank. A plate of fried ham had just been cleared and sent back for more when the Badger entered. He greeted them all. "It must be getting on for luncheon time," he remarked to the Otter. "You must be hungry." "Indeed," replied the Otter, "the sight of these greedy young hedgehogs stuffing themselves makes me feel famished." The hedgehogs looked timidly up at Mr. Badger, but were too shy to say anything. "Here, you two youngsters, be off home," said the Badger kindly. "I'll send someone with you to show you the way." Presently, the others sat down to luncheon together. The Mole found himself placed next to Mr. Badger, and so took the opportunity to tell Badger how comfortable and homelike it all felt to him. "Once well underground," he said, "you know exactly where you are." The Badger simply beamed on him. "There's no security or peace except underground." The Mole agreed, and the Badger in consequence got very friendly with him. "When lunch is over," he said, "I'll take you round this little place of mine." I'm going to pause for a moment. So remember, Mole normally lives underground. That's where moles live. And badgers also live underground in burrows. And so Mole and Badger both agree that it's lovely to live underground. They feel most comfortable there. After luncheon, the Badger lighted a lantern and bade the Mole follow him. Crossing the hall, they passed down one of the principal tunnels, and the wavering light of the lantern gave glimpses on either side of rooms both large and small. The Mole was staggered at the size. "How on earth, Badger," he said at last, "did you ever find time and strength to do all this? It's astonishing." "It would be astonishing," said the Badger simply, "if I had done it, but as a matter of fact I did none of it. You see, long ago, on the spot where the wild wood stands now, there was a city of people. Here where we are standing they lived. They were a powerful people and great builders. But what has become of them all? Asked the Mole. Who can tell? Said the Badger. People come, they stay for a while, and they go, but we remain. There were badgers here long before that same city ever came to be, and now there are badgers here again. When they got back to the kitchen, they found the Rat walking up and down. The underground atmosphere was getting on his nerves. Come along, Mole, he said as soon as he caught sight of them. We must get off while it's daylight. It'll be all right, my fine fellow, said the Otter. I'm coming along with you, and if there's a head that needs to be punched, you can confidently rely upon me to punch it. You really needn't fret, Ratty, added the Badger. My passages run further than you think. When you are ready to go, you shall leave by one of my shortcuts. Before long, the Badger led the way along a damp tunnel that wound and dipped for a weary distance. At last, daylight began to show itself through tangled growth near the mouth of the passage. The Badger, bidding them good-bye, pushed them hurriedly through the opening and hastily made good again the creepers and brushwood that surrounded it. That's the end of this chapter. So Badger had them in his home. He showed them around, he fed them, he let them sleep there, and then he showed them how to get out so they could head back home. And we'll find out what happens next time as Rat and Mole head back home. Thanks for listening.